Hello friends, clients, and fellow financial advisors. My name is Ron Bullis, and this is another episode of The Future of Advice. My guest on today's show is the chairman and CEO of the Colony Group. He is also recognized as one of the leaders in the wealth management industry, and he is relentlessly dedicated to bringing meaning and joy to the lives of Colony Group clients and his team members. His passion for this is reflected in the recognition he's received, having been named 10 times to the Barron's Top 100 Independent Advisors, included in Worth Magazine's Top 250 Advisors, and he's been selected 6 times as a super lawyer by the Massachusetts Super Lawyers. But what he's most proud of, according to his bio, is that the Colony Group has been named as one of just 50 of the top firms for financial advisors to work by InvestmentNews. He's also the author of a book called Personal Financial Planning for Executives and Entrepreneurs, and he's recently launched a really cool podcast that I would suggest checking out called Seeking the Extraordinary, which is on a mission to identify, understand, and explore the undiscovered world of the extraordinary. My guest is also passionate about public service. He served as the chairman of the board of directors of the National Brain Tumor Society for over 5 years. He also serves on the board of Cure GBM and the Pediatric Cancer Cure. He's the founder of the Nathanson Family Catalyst Fund for Brain Tumor Research and the Nathanson Family Catalyst Fund for Cardiac Valve Research. That's not even half of the list of things that this guy is involved with. His experience and his resume is as vast and far-reaching as are his books and hobbies. I am really excited to welcome to the Future of Advice, Michael Nathanson.
Wow. Thank you for that amazing introduction, Ron. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. We were just chatting right before we got going about how much fun it is to do an interview in person, safely, for those people watching.
This is the first one I've done in a long time. It may be a whole year.
Yeah, it's great. We've got beautiful Naples in the background here. When I checked this morning, we just got 4 fresh inches of powder in Michigan, where I'm from. Schools closed, half the offices are closed, and so I did make sure we sent some snapshots this morning up to my team of my run on the beach.
It's not coincidental that I'm working in our Naples office at this time of the year.
Yeah, it's beautiful down here. Okay, so to get us kicked off, your newly launched podcast, Seeking the Extraordinary. Your cover picture for it. There's a picture of you holding what appears to be some type of martial arts sword, a katana or something like this. What's the story behind that? Why did you select that? And maybe tell us about it.
I love that we're starting there. Well, one of the things that we say at the Colony Group over and over again is that we see ourselves as a ship sailing in a sea of the ordinary, seeking the extraordinary. And that's a commentary on what we believe is the industry that we work in today being more or less a sea of sameness. And we look around and see people doing great work, and also are able to see that those people who are doing great work are sometimes doing really the same thing that the person next door is doing or the person down the street is doing. And while we have great respect for the industry, we do seek to differentiate ourselves. And we seek to differentiate ourselves as a company, but we also seek to differentiate ourselves individually. We talk about living meaningful lives, joyful lives. That's really built into our vision, which is to be the leading financial advisory company in the world for clients and employees who seek meaning and joy in their lives. So for me, this search for the extraordinary in, frankly, somewhat of a sea of sameness, which is our industry, is something that pushes me forward personally, and I hope pushes all of our team members throughout the Colony Group. And I was thinking about doing a podcast, and I enjoy communicating with the public, and I enjoy sharing our messages with the public, and have done a lot of writing. You mentioned that we did the whole book thing, have written tons of articles, and do a lot of speaking, a lot of interviews, attend lots of conferences, and we were thinking about going into the podcast route. And by the way, I'm very mindful that you could easily say to me, Ron, that, well, isn't doing a podcast somewhat ordinary? And the truth is, yes, it is, but what if we did a podcast that wasn't yet another podcast about the markets? What if we did a podcast that wasn't yet another podcast about financial advice or about buying, the latest and greatest Bitcoin or whatever? And started thinking about our brand. And our brand is about seeking the extraordinary. It is about doing what's core to what we need to do, but seeking the extraordinary beyond that core. How can we be better? How can we differentiate ourselves in a meaningful way? So decided to go on an exploration of what it is that makes people truly achieve their potential. What is it that makes some people get all of the potential out of their lives, whereas some people do great things in their lives, have a good life, but don't necessarily get to that extraordinary place in their life? And that may be a choice, it may not be a choice. So we launched Seeking the Extraordinary. We've had some great guests so far, and great diverse guests.
Yeah.
And I chose the sword because I had done another interview, and the photographer who had just shot different parts of my life was also interested in what was different about me, and I am a black belt in Kung Fu. And I've been doing it for a long time, and I think Kung Fu is beautiful, and it's very spiritual for me. It's not the violent art that some people see it as if you watch a lot of Kung Fu movies. For me, it's beautiful, it's spiritual, and it is differentiated. And that was a Chinese broadsword, and I love the Chinese broadsword. I think it's a beautiful instrument. And some of the forms that I do with it I think are beautiful. And for me, that was a representation of a guy who's another advisor doing all those things you listed in your introduction, but who's also doing some other things that are maybe extraordinary, maybe just meaningful and joyful as well.
Yeah, as I think about it, I believe that not just inside of our industry, but maybe everywhere right now, there's this craving for authenticity, right? And I think our industry, that we have kind of this mask that we try and present to our clients, right? That we have things figured out, that we've got these, this clear understanding of what's going on in the markets. That's why I should be managing your money. When if we were actually really honest with people, we'd tell them, well, maybe we read about it more than others, or we're a little more keyed into the news, but we have no better, crystal ball about the future or not. So I really like the fact that, and we were talking about this a little bit at dinner last night, that you're interweaving who you are as the individual into not just your work with your team, but your clients as well.
And the key to authenticity, anyone who studied authenticity knows that the key to authenticity is vulnerability. If we're not willing to be vulnerable and to show the world what we truly are, how can we call ourselves authentic? And it is not a traditional thing for the CEO of a large wealth management and business management company to go out in public holding a sword, not wearing what I'm wearing right now, but rather wearing basically a pair of sweats. Yeah. And that's just who I am, and I'm not afraid to tell the world who I am.
Well, I think there's when I looked at the image, and why I wanted to start the conversation here is there's this dichotomy of, Michael Nathanson, the ordinary, right? I think you were wearing like a tracksuit or something like this, right? You're not in a beautiful custom suit or something.
I've actually received some heat about that too.
No, I think it's great. So for those that are watching or listening that maybe aren't really familiar with the Colony Group, we don't have to spend tons of time here, but just 30,000 foot picture, size of the organization, number of employees, assets under management.
Sure. We are, thank you for putting assets under management last, by the way. So we are 15 offices in, I believe, 9 states now. We have a little over 250 terrific employees spread out around the country. So we go from the East Coast to the West Coast. We go from north to the south. And terrific team. I always like to start with that. Terrific set of thousands of clients throughout the country, some internationally as well. And we are what I would describe as a both wealth management and business management firm. We provide We provide wealth management services, including tax planning and estate planning, all the full array of financial planning, cash management, retirement planning, philanthropic planning, educational planning, all of that. And that all is on top of a very robust investment platform, a platform that we describe as being an enhanced open architecture platform, one where we try to shed the bias that many have. I find that people love to talk about how unbiased they are. And the reality is that we talk about being unbiased, but we're almost invariably biased toward whatever it is we're doing, whether that's open architecture or it's proprietary or it's mutual funds or individual securities. We all say, well, see, we're unbiased because we do this, but the reality is we're biased.
It's our bias.
What we're doing. And so we try to address that, acknowledging our biases, but trying to get past that. We provide the full array not only of wealth management services but also business management services. So for those clients that require, for example, all of the financial accounting services, the bill pay services, what some might call the family office services, we do that. We actually go beyond that for clients that are engaged in royalties. We do royalty management. We do concert tour accounting for clients who may be entertainers. We serve clients in terms of operating their ancillary companies, their ancillary help. We truly do. People talk about comprehensive wealth management, and that's one of the worst cliches in the industry.
Sure.
It just means
it's almost a never-ending list of things that you should stand ready to do for your client,
exactly.
Right? Yeah, you couldn't bucket it into like 10 things, like this is my comprehensive wealth management plan, and you're like,
right.
Well, yeah, but then the next client that walks in the door with their unique sets of needs and wants and goals and desires, like they might need an entirely different bucket of 10 or 12 services.
Exactly. And rather than use a cliche like comprehensive wealth management or holistic wealth management or holistic planning services, I'll just put out there that go take a look at our website. I just gave you a description of our services, and I'll let you make the determination. I'll let your viewers make the determination as to whether that's comprehensive or holistic.
Yeah, and we'll pick at this one just a little bit because I always chuckle. I feel like when we say something like, well, we do comprehensive wealth management planning, right? It's something like, well, we expect water to be wet, right? I mean, people don't come to exactly. a wealth management firm and you're like, oh, we don't do comprehensive planning. We only do like really, really, limited financial planning.
The problem is that most people who talk about that actually believe it is differentiated. Yeah. They actually believe when they use the cliches like holistic or comprehensive, or they talk about how they use best of breed managers. There's another great cliche. Or that they're fiercely independent. These are some of the most used and abused cliches in our industry. And I just challenge people who do that to really think about how differentiated that is. And if they ultimately conclude it's not, what are they doing to try to address that and truly differentiate themselves?
Yeah. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that, but I'm gonna back up just a little bit because I think of all the leaders that I've had the fortune so far of meeting in our industry, and I'm pretty new to it. I've been in the industry about 12 years, but been running my firm now for 3. You're one of the few that comes from a pretty interesting background. So undergrad, then you go to law school, get your Juris Doctorate, cum laude, and then you get an LLM in tax from Boston University of Law, become a partner in one of the largest law firms in the country, right, at a very young age, and then all of a sudden, did you get hit by the proverbial like Cupid's arrow or something and fell in love with wealth management? What was the catalyst? What was the inflection point for partner at one of the largest law firms in the country to, I think I'm going to go join the cottage industry of RIAs and wealth management?
I had a great career as a lawyer. I think it's a career many would just dream about having, and I am completely appreciative of that. I'm so grateful that I had all those opportunities. I had great opportunities. I went to Harvard Law School. I had the privilege of being in the same not only the same class, the same section as Barack Obama. I had just the best experience, just a really enriching experience, and I was very driven, I'm still very driven, just in a different way. And I knew that I had to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a big firm lawyer and handle all kinds of sophisticated matters. And I really wanted to be a litigator. LA law was popular at the time, and I was a real fan of the Michael Cusack character played by Harry Hamlin, and that's the guy that I wanted to be, and doing all kinds of really neat stuff. And I went out and picked what I thought was the best law firm, which, by the way, is an outstanding law firm, Hale & Dorr, which is now Wilmer Cutler Pickering Hale & Dorr, or Wilmer Hale, one of the top law firms in the world. And I was so grateful, and I became a partner at a young age, and had it all, had a great practice, and had these great clients. And I realized after I became partner that everything that I had been hoping to achieve when I became partner, I'd have it all then. And it was great. I loved what I did. I have great respect for the people that are doing it right now. These are brilliant people. But I ultimately realized that I was looking for something a little bit more in my life. And I started in my mid-30s to listen more to the universe and realize that the universe was speaking to me, as I believe it speaks to everybody. And I had a small client, tiny client, called the Colony Group, and they had, I don't know, 500, 550 million under management. By the way, I never did tell you, so I never did give you the AUM number. And
that's okay. That's all right. I mean, it seems to be the unfortunate marker with which people measure success in our industry. Right. So forget that I said it.
We're approximately 12 billion. If you do want to know that, I'm not trying to hide that. Yeah. I'm very proud of that. Yeah. I just feel it's not. It's somewhat of a deceptive number sometimes. People hide behind it. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot.
It's the idea that bigger is better, right? I mean, I think it's still what some of the largest firms in the industry, whether they're wirehouses, insurance companies, right? They kind of stand on this idea that, we manage $1 trillion or, whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't like to dwell on that, but I am very proud of that. So small company, the Colony Group, and they offered me to come over and effectively be on the track to succeed the founder, Kirby Hamilton. And I thought about it. My wife and I went on a vacation together, and I thought about it, and I did what I think was the unthinkable. I decided to resign this hard-earned partnership I had done so much to earn, but I had a lot of confidence in myself and felt that if it didn't work out for me, I could go back to the same firm, or I could go to another law firm. And I decided to take a leap of faith. I did not have a signed agreement, a signed contract. I had no written assurances, but I just felt confident, and I loved this little company. And Ron, when I think about the industry, I think about the evolution of practices. This was, I would describe as a collaboration. So as I think about the industry, most practitioners begin as practices. Practice is basically it's a
self-employed individual.
An activity,
yes,
exactly, an activity that circles around one person. There may be multiple people involved, but it's really around one primary service provider. Sometimes practices get together and share resources. I would call that a collaboration. And they're working together, but they're really also working separately. And I would describe the Colony Group when I first joined it as somewhat of a collaboration. And I wanted to make that collaboration into a business. And I feel like that was my path, my opportunity. And a business I would describe as now it's a collaboration where everyone shares the same vision, the same mission. They're all working together. And shared processes, etc. And what I discovered ultimately was that wasn't the final stage in the evolution, that there was something beyond that. And that's what drives me today. It's the idea that a business can go beyond being a business, can be an enterprise, something that's sustainable, something that's transcended its people, something that will endure for generations to come.
Something extraordinary.
Something extraordinary, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, when I was researching for this interview and talking to some people that know you, and I think to myself, like, how many people would I know, or do I know of, that, had the partner track, or, had the partnership at a very prestigious law firm, and then leave for, what would now be considered a tiny RIA, right? I mean, 15, 16 years ago, a $500 million of assets under management was a fairly good-sized RIA, but I feel like maybe you've been on this path of seeking the extraordinary for a long time, and finally putting your podcast out there and putting a name on it is an interesting thing. Talk to me a little about, I've got a bunch of questions that I want to ask about what you think some of the most important challenges facing the industry are, but I want to start with one that I think is really important, and we're all kind of wrestling with this one right now, both people in the business, clients with their families. How are you translating this very important cultural element of seeking the extraordinary, right? You lead a large organization now, offices all over the country, clients all over the world, and then COVID hits and everybody's working from home. How are you facing and kind of winning this challenge of continuing to drive a really, really beautiful culture, right? That I think focuses on the right things, not on, well, we're at 12 billion of AUM, we'll be at 15 billion. I mean, we have to have business markers, I get that, but this idea of best practices aren't good enough, right? We need extraordinary. So just how are you guys navigating that? How are you thinking about that as the CEO of the organization?
Right, and thank you for focusing that question around culture, because it really is around culture. I think of culture as culture is the mortar that holds the bricks together. And the way I think about this is in some respects no different, perhaps it's even accelerated, I think, by COVID and by this pandemic. So we have a national culture. And I would describe our national culture as, I could use words like collaborative and, again, team-based. Again, who doesn't use those words? So let's just assume those things. Again, if you have a culture that's not collaborative, I pity you. So let's assume we have those fundamentals in place. Our culture is based on two fundamental principles, just two. Number one, super teams before superstars. And when I talk about that, what I mean is not that we don't have superstars. We have many superstars in our company. I'd like to think we have a lot of superstars in our company. What we don't need, though, is them acting like superstars. What we need is for them to be their best selves and to understand that that best self requires that they be part of a team, and they will not achieve their full potential unless they are working with and for a team. So we have a culture, super teams before superstars. And if any of your viewers want to learn more about how we think about that, I suggest that they watch the TED Talk, Forget the Pecking Order at Work, which we ask all team members to watch and understand before they even join us on their first day. And it's my favorite TED Talk.
The title is Forget the Pecking Order at Work?
Correct. Now that may sound, by the way, like a TED Talk about hierarchies. It's actually not. And actually, just really briefly, what the speaker begins by talking about an experiment that was done at Purdue University, and they utilized chickens to measure productivity. And they had a control group of chickens, and the control group of chickens, equal number of males and females, and they watched those chickens for 6 generations to measure their productivity by the number of eggs produced. And then they had another experimental group that same number of males and females, equal number, and they watched that same group of chickens for 6 generations. But these chickens were the biggest and strongest and healthiest chickens they could find. They called them super chickens. And wouldn't you know it, at the end of 6 generations, the control group produced lots of eggs, which is what chickens do. The experimental group produced very few eggs, and actually only 2 or 3 chickens even survived. Do you know why? It's because these chickens pecked each other to death. They killed each other. Because in that culture, I know we're talking about chickens, but in that culture, one chicken's success had to be at the expense of the weaker chickens. And of course these are chickens, but if you translate that into the lesson that it might teach us, it is this lesson that a stronger team is far more important than superstars. The second element of our culture, we call it consciousness or awareness. And we a number of us really like the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. But that book is really just describing something that's already out there. It's this way of thinking about how we're feeling and how we're perceiving the world. And it's a focus on having awareness about when we're in drama, personally, when we're at our best, which is when we're open and curious, and when we're not necessarily at our best. We call it being below the line, which is not a negative thing. Yeah. But when we're below the line, that's when we're committed to being right. We're not committed to being curious. Yeah. And that's really when we're not at our best. That's our national culture. Now, here's the thing about our culture. When you hear people talk about how they go out and they do 12 mergers or 20 mergers, or they're going and bringing in people from breakaways from all around the country and they have to acculturate those people, yeah, not the case. That's not reality. You can think that's the reality. Maybe you tell yourself that's misleading. We understand that every time a firm joins us through a merger or through a breakaway kind of transaction, strategic hire, whatever you want to call it, they bring their own culture, and we're okay with that. What we expect is that that culture is consistent with our national culture. It's got to be consistent. We don't want any superstars coming in and mucking it up for the rest of us. But as long as it's consistent, we actually believe we're stronger with these new cultures coming in. It's a form of multiculturalism, and we love it. We tell people, come and bring your culture. Let us learn from it. You just have to agree you're going to learn from ours as well. And if we can agree to that and agree to respect each other's differences and learn from them, that, to me, is the ultimate cultural construct. Now, bring that into the pandemic. We don't have to all be together because that was already the case coming into it, this concept of multiculturalism. And I believe that we've been able to retain that strength throughout this. However, one thing that I do fear is the loss of social capital. And social capital, in order to really get the most social capital, the optimal amount, we do have to be together in person.
I would agree with that. I think that's one of the things that you see. Well, that's why we're actually together in this interview, right? When we were going back and forth about setting it up, and we were like, we can do this in a safe way. Let's do this in person, right? This is just, it's a wonderful thing that I think everybody's, missing and craving right now. While we're talking about culture, I didn't have this on my question list, but since I get to ask the questions, here we go.
Of course.
I think our industry has, and this is from my perception, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think our industry has a compensation / revenue sharing type of problem that seems to be pretty pervasive across, like whether it's wirehouses, insurance companies, et cetera, where the best salesperson or the biggest producer tends to get the largest share. And it seems like the industry has kind of grown up on rewarding superstars, not super teams. Something I talk about with my coach frequently is the idea of not being fiercely independent, but being fiercely interdependent.
I love that.
And so talk to me a little bit about, without getting into specifics or maybe sharing personal details about people's compensation at your firm, how are you maybe aligning compensation incentives at the level to incentivize people to build rock star teams, superstar teams? How have you been addressing that challenge?
Yeah. By actually doing it, my friend. That's how. And let me just say, I loved your reference to interdependence, because that is the precise reason why the cliche fiercely independent really bothers me. Yeah. We all, if you read the seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey talks about this concept of how we're born dependent, we become independent, and then we make a decision. Do we want to be independent and limit ourselves, or do we want to embrace interdependence and, again, become extraordinary? That's the key. It's being interdependent. So let me just say this, back to your question. We also believe in some of those models as well, but unlike most other firms, and I know this is anathema to many when I'm about to say something that people are going to hear and say, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that. We actually don't believe that the only important people, they're of course critical, are the people who are on the so-called front lines with the clients, the advisors, and those people are critical. We do not do what we do without them. We have to have terrific advisors. But we also believe that the people who are doing the asset management function behind the scenes are also critical, super critical. And we also believe that the people that are running technology for us are super critical, or compliance, super critical, legal, human capital, administration, management. And so we have created a structure that rewards people for different functions that don't all have to do directly with revenue. Can we all agree that ultimately revenue, sure, is in part managed by the advisory team, but it doesn't exist without an entire company behind that advisory team, not in a sustainable way. And so we have created a broad-based, widely held partnership that's comprised of people from all of those disciplines. And we have a management structure that is comprised from people from all of those disciplines. Are you familiar with the E-Myth, Ron?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's one of the first books I read when I was a teenager. My first kind of coach / mentor was a entrepreneurial-minded individual, and I remember I've probably read it a dozen times in my life, and I see this a lot in financial practices. So go ahead.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I'm mindful of the E-Myth as well. What happens is that in our industry, and it's the same thing, by the way, I love our industry. Yes. This is not endemic to our industry. This is you see this in the legal industry, you see it in the accounting industry, the insurance industry, you see it all over the place. But what you see are people who are wonderful practitioners. Yeah. And they therefore believe, and maybe people around them believe, that they're therefore entrepreneurs. That's sometimes the case, and it's quite often not the case. And I think that we, as this industry matures, we have to recognize that and look at the other industries. Look what's happened in the law firm space. Yeah. All the top law firms are now led by non-lawyers. There are people who are running them as the wonderful businesses that they can be, enterprises. The same thing on the accounting side. Yeah. And I think that's what ultimately we're going to see happen in the financial services industry as well.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, because I feel like there's almost this kind of coming of age or kind of growing up that our industry is starting to run into, right, where we're asked to deal with so many things. And even if you just looked at the set of rules and regulations around two things, taxation and investment advisory stuff, I would make the case that unless you're doing nothing but reading those regulations on a regular basis and using them on a regular basis, you're going to miss some of them, right? I mean, it's such a level of expertise that the ego I see, and I fall prey to this, and I think a lot of advisors have, right, is that I have all the answers, I have all of the solutions, I can be the master at all of these things. And maybe back to the E-Myth concept, right, where I think the book actually uses a drywaller or something like this, right, as the example, and then he's really good at that, and then he moves into hiring a few people to work with him, and next thing you know, he's got a bunch of people working for him, and his business is doing terrible because he doesn't really want to run a business, nor does he love running a business, but yet.
Yeah, at our company, we would call that zone of genius. It's not that person's zone of genius. Okay. And this concept of living within our zone of genius, understanding what it is that we're best at. You and I were talking about the book Essentialism last night, or Mastery, and these are the same kinds of concepts. Can we all agree that, again, if we're willing to be interdependent with others and acknowledge that I may be good at this, but someone else is better at that and should be doing that, and can I be comfortable relying on them? And together, can we both do what we could not have done individually, at least not as well individually? That is the way that I would describe everything we are trying to achieve at the Colony Group.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So another challenge that I see in the industry, and I'd like your thoughts on this, it kind of dovetails really well, is the idea of a pathway to partnership, of recruiting next-gen talent and building teams. It's something that prior to COVID, and we'd go to industry conferences, and people like you would actually be speaking at them, not me. I'd be listening, taking notes, talking about building teams and succession planning. And then I talk to advisors and small firms, large firms, practices around the country. And I don't know whether it's because maybe the people who are controlling the business and the practice don't want to kind of share some of the wealth, or if it's just we have, again, not specific to our industry, but kind of this culture of Lone Rangerism, right, of fierce independence. Talk to me a little about how you guys built this partnership culture, right, Because what I see happening is young advisors coming in, and young I don't mean by age necessarily, but new people coming in the business, and they have some modicum of success, or they have kind of an entrepreneurial, they have a little bit of their own maybe E-Myth thing happen, and they look at their opportunity at the firm they're at and they say, this is a pyramid scheme where I never get to the top. I might as well go start my own thing. And now we have this explosion of, companies like mine, right? Small RIAs that started because there was advisors maybe frustrated where they felt like that, the financial opportunity or owning something, wasn't there. I think building a pathway to partnership is an immensely important thing for firms that want to win the future. Talk to me a little about your structure, how you guys built it, why that, you guys have a significant number of partners at your firm, which sounds like an anathema to some people listening to this, like, geez, I wouldn't want to have, a committee of 70 plus partners or, whatever it is. Talk to me a little about your pathway to partnership culture, why it's important, why you think we need to, do this right to win.
Yeah. At the Colony Group, we say that we seek to attract, develop, engage, and retain the best people in the industry. And Ron, I think you just said it well. How can you possibly expect to attract, develop, engage, and retain the best people in the industry if you're basically telling them that they have no opportunity ultimately to own a piece of the pie? I'm telling you right now, there isn't a single firm out there, I don't care how much money they throw at me, what kind of opportunity that could attract me as a participant, as someone who would want to be part of that firm, if I didn't have an opportunity to be an owner. So rather than look at this and say, well, aren't we special because we're owners, and let's pull up the ladder and, well, we'll give other people phantom equity or whatever, and we'll just pay them a lot, we'll give them nice bonus structures.
Or we'll just keep, incessantly promising them that it's coming, right?
Yeah,
it's something I see with guys
exactly.
in my age run. They're like, 40 years old, and they've been in the business for 10 or 12 years, and they're like, in the next 3 years, the owner's retiring, and and I'm like, man, you've been saying that for...
It's just not realistic.
Yeah.
It's just not realistic to expect that you're going to get and keep the best people in the industry. And so we have been building a culture that allows for people from all disciplines within our company to ultimately become owners, but it's not easy. And we have a clear path to ownership, and that path, by the way, is different depending on the function. So we naturally have a written path for those people who are advisors, what we would call wealth managers. But we have a separate path for those people that we would call business managers. We have a separate path for our investment people, we have a separate path for our tax people, and we have a separate path on the pure management side as well. And while I hope we haven't missed anybody, the intent is to make sure that we're being clear with people, setting clear expectations, telling people we will hold them accountable. They need to hold themselves accountable, but that if in fact they are able to move themselves up the path, they can become owners of our firm. And by the way, one class of equity. We don't play games with voting and non-voting.
There's not 4 of you that have all the control,
exactly,
and then 70 of you that have
junior partners. Okay. We don't do any of those games. Okay. We do have different amounts of ownership.
Sure.
That changes over time, though. And why do we do this? To attract, develop, engage, and retain the best people in the industry. And also because, go back to what I said at the beginning of this discussion, because we seek enterprise status. We think we want to build a legacy. I want to be part of a legacy where I know that I will have been part of creating something extraordinary that will be around for generations to come. Yeah. And maybe no one will know who I am, 10 years after I leave the Colony Group. Okay, that's fine. What I will know is that I will have been part of the team that put this together, and that it will go on for generations to come, serving people and serving the employees who get to be part of that special company as well.
Yeah, I think in one of my coaching sessions a while back, years ago, we were having this conversation about business models, and we were going around and we looked at it and said, there's really 2 paths. There's what we call the rape, loot, pillage, and plunder path, and suck all of the money and the juice out of it that you can, and then turn the lights off, right? And these are maybe the advisors or firms or industries that are not consciously building enterprise. They're not consciously trying to build something bigger than themselves. Or the other side is and I think this is a hard dichotomy. There's no middle ground. Or you have to want to build something bigger than yourself, something extraordinary.
I just believe, and I know I'm not the first person to say this, that if you really are focusing on you being your best self and being your most successful self and making a name for yourself, the less you focus on yourself and making it about you, the better you'll do. And if you're out there making it all about you, you might think that it's about you, but that's going to be short-lived. And the great contribution we make, it's really about making sure that your team is strong, making sure that you're serving others, making sure that you are just helping others be their best selves. That is the key, ultimately, to building a professional legacy for yourself. I've written about this, and there's a great movie called The Emperor's Club. Have you ever seen it?
No, I don't think so.
Stars Kevin Kline.
No, I don't think so. All right, I'll put it on the list.
Yeah, put it on the list. And there's a classics teacher in this old-fashioned boys' school from the 40s or 50s. It's kind of that old school mentality about education. But he's teaching the classics. He's teaching about ancient Rome and Greece, and there's a sign in the back of the school. And he, at the very first day, he has a student go back and read the sign, and it's a sign that says something to the effect of, "I am Shutruk-Nahunte, ruler and sovereign of the land of Elam. I conquered vast lands, and I brought back the steel that I found and erected it as a statue to my god, Shutruk-Nahunte, whatever, 1200 BC." Now, Shutruk-Nahunte is a real person. And what he says to his class is, he says, "Okay, now everyone open up your books and tell me everything you can tell me about Shutruk-Nahunte." And everyone goes and looks in their books, and they can't find anything. And he finally says, "You're not going to find anything, nor will you find anything in any book about Shutruk-Nahunte. It's a real person. He conquered a vast swath of land that covers much of current Iran, Iraq, Syria. And no one knows who he is. And do you know why? And this is the lesson that the teacher teaches us. It's because great conquest without contribution is meaningless. That is the way we should be thinking. All these firms that are out there getting big for the sake of getting big, why? What's your contribution? Why are you doing this? Are you just out conquering lands? Because if you are, you'll be Shutruk-Nahunte one day too.
Interesting. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about, one of the things, again, that seems to be happening in our industry is firms just buying other firms to grow, right? And maybe that's one of the fastest, and well, money's cheap right now. But, the M&A activity in our space and firms coming together seems to me to be just, what all big firms are doing. And I look at it and I ask myself something similar, which is that new firm, right, actually making more value for a client? Like, is it actually better, or is it just bigger? Because bigger isn't always better.
It can actually be worse.
It could be, right? You could lose original culture. You could lose original values. You could lose this. Let's expound a little bit more on that, because I know you've got a lot of background on and experience doing acquisitions. Talk to us about how you think about acquisitions, and taking the Colony Group from $500 million to $12+ billion. I mean, that's no small feat, right? And I don't want to underscore the business metric of that growth, right? That's an amazing trajectory that you and your team have accomplished. But how do you guys think about acquisitions? Because I'm getting the sense from you, from our conversation, that you guys aren't just trying to be the biggest firm in the industry, right? That's not extraordinary. How are you guys thinking about acquisitions, and what are some of the things that you also see happening in the industry around this that you think are maybe not a great end result for clients and advisors?
Yeah, and I would note that, again, this is one of the problems with assets under management. Just note that two of the firms that merged with us, by the way, we don't talk about acquisitions. For us, it's mergers. To me, acquisition is a disrespectful term. It means we're buying you, we're taking over, and we're disposing of what you had from a legacy perspective. We do mergers. We don't do acquisitions. Two of the firms that joined us are business management firms that were not all about assets. One of them had no assets whatsoever. So we've done 10 mergers and 2 strategic hires. And our growth through the years has been a combination of organic and inorganic growth. And I knew way back when that if we wanted to achieve our vision of being the leading financial advisory company in the world for clients and employees who seek meaning and joy in their lives, we would need to join forces with other great people who were like-minded in some respects and not like-minded in other respects. Our litmus test for doing a merger is we must make our merger partner better than before, and they must make us better than before. We use mergers as a way to get better, not as a way to get bigger. And I won't bore you or your viewers by going through every single transaction, but if you tested me and you asked me about any single transaction, I would tell you exactly how we made them better and how they made us better. We've gotten to be a much better firm on an accelerated basis by being able to go back to that commitment that I talked to you about, this concept of being above the line, curious, not committed to being right, but committed to being open-minded, versus this anchoring kind of methodology, which is that we have all the answers. We're doing everything perfectly, and you should do it the same way. By the way, that's the same way I think about hiring. I often tell people, I've heard so many people, Ron, say to me, yeah, I'm looking for the next me. I'm trying to hire someone just like me.
My organization couldn't handle the next me. That's the joke that we have on my team. Like, we don't want another Ron.
I'm not sure what would happen if there was another one of me, but the reality is that if you really want to make your organization better, hire someone who's not like you. Hire someone who's different, who offers different perspectives, and then let that person talk about those perspectives and be open to them. It's the same thing for mergers. You want to get bigger? Fine, go ahead and get bigger. I submit to you that's not a very sustainable model. Getting better through mergers is not only sustainable, I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I look at this, the M&A activity too, one of the things that I see as an underlying challenge here is I think a lot of it's kind of masked in the idea of succession planning. And I'm sure there are probably really, really valid reasons for firms to be acquired or roll up under a larger firm for purpose of creating liquidity or things like this. But it doesn't seem to be changing the dynamics. This is my perception looking at it as a small firm new in the industry. It doesn't seem to be changing the dynamics in terms of the average age of an advisor. The diversity of our teams, and by that I don't just mean ethnicity or gender, I truly mean like diverse backgrounds, experiences, coming from law, coming from business management. It seems to be just replacing one moniker with another moniker, and nothing changed.
I agree. Legal structures are not going to solve succession and continuity planning. I like the concept of continuity planning a little bit better than succession planning, and that actually is not original. A dear friend and colleague of mine brought that up to me years ago, this concept that we think of succession planning. The whole industry talks about that. Someone needs to succeed me. I'm the king, and someone needs to succeed me. And just think about how, frankly, obnoxious that sounds. Yeah. It's continuity planning. Yeah. It's planning to make sure that your clients and your employees and all of your stakeholders are still served going forward and served continuously. And I think we all need to be thinking about it. But I completely agree with what you just said, which is that legal structures are not going to get there. What it requires is a commitment on the part of the current generation to be willing to mentor and let the next generation come in, or what we would call G2 come in. So we, for example, have a whole G2 program, and we invest heavily in that G2, making sure that they're getting opportunities, and we promote them. And there are people who are 12 or more years younger than me who have top positions in our company because they have to. That's part of continuity planning. Yeah, I see that as well, and people say, okay, box checked. I mean, if you're someone who's out there thinking you can just do things and then check a box, life's not that simple.
Yeah. I mean, putting a couple of these pieces together, there's a study or a report that Ernst & Young does every couple of years on kind of a state of the global wealth management industry. I think the last one was 2019. I've read it, I've talked about this now a ton of times because there's so many things in this report, and I have no financial interest in it whatsoever, but some of their findings were just like mind-blowing. They found that 1/3 of clients were planning to leave their advisor and move in the next 3 years. Half of them were not satisfied with the fee structure, and 80% of them said they wanted a more personalized approach to it, but they were just sitting on the sidelines because they didn't feel like they were getting it, right? And I look at kind of what we're talking about here in this idea of succession planning, continuity planning, building that next gen, right? I think if you go into this from a position of ego, right, as the person at the top, you're likely actually one of the organizations right now that's looking at 1/3 of your clients leaving, right?
On that same theme, I would say a lack of innovation in our industry. I talk a lot about Nokia, and you and I were talking about that story, and I was telling you that that you look at Nokia phones, and Nokia is a company that owned basically half the cell phone market at some point. And now no one even knows who Nokia is anymore. And the reason is because their failure of innovation. They got too comfortable in their dominant position. And I think that could be said for some in our industry as well, that you get too comfortable, and we must constantly be innovating. And innovating not in a way that's comfortable for us, but rather innovating in anticipation of what clients are looking for, what clients might need, and anticipating that. Also being aware of the ecosystem and understanding that if you're not doing that, someone else is. I often talk about economic Darwinism, business Darwinism here, and this concept that Darwinism is all about understanding that the environment will constantly change, and the species, in this case the companies, that can adapt best to that change are those that will be successful. And those that are still stuck in the old ways of 20 or 25 years ago, they're not long for the world. They are, as I would say, naturally selected for extinction. They just don't know.
They don't know it yet.
They don't know
they're
it.
Zombies. They're walking dead.
Exactly. So this failure of innovation or a willingness to innovate, that's another big challenge. I think another big challenge for the industry is the legal landscape and the business landscape. The reality is that we talk about the fiduciary standard, right? And people trumpet the fiduciary standard, and I certainly do. It is the best, in my opinion, legal standard out there, right? It requires us to put our client's interest ahead of our own and to mitigate conflicts of interest, to put the client first at all times, even if it's adverse to our own
hard
interest.
stop.
Right. No question about that. And we're all out there, the industry is all out there, talking about, isn't it great we're fiduciaries? Well, the reality is, look around. Now what's happened is the SEC came in and, in my opinion, respectfully, did not do the consumer a favor with regulation best interest, or Reg BI. Because now the wirehouses may be subject to a higher standard. They do have to put clients' interest first at the time of making recommendations. But the reality is that after that, they're not required to do that. And if you really parse the rules, the wirehouse industry, those are people who are legally salespeople, and they're only allowed to provide so-called incidental financial planning advice. And the reality is that while we might know that, nobody knows that. And you know something? I don't know that anybody is going to know that. So until someone finally harmonizes the standard and makes everyone subject to the same standard, this is not good for our industry, because the reality is now the wirehouses can hide behind Reg BI and do all kinds of, they've got way more advertising dollars, they build brands, and the consumer not only doesn't understand the difference, but frankly, they don't really care. They're looking at the industry and thinking, oh, well, and I'm not going to name any names because it's not going to help, but that everyone knows that company, they must be a great company. They don't even understand what's happening.
Yeah, back to the idea of size translates into they must be better at something, right?
Yes.
And consumers that. I think one of the most pernicious things that I was worried about as I was getting into the, running an RIA and truly wanting to operate as a fiduciary, was they were talking about the fiduciary standard kind of being, driven down from on high. And there was lots of lobbying, and it turned political, as these things maybe seem to always do. And I thought to myself, when everybody at the big firms, whether they're insurance brokers, wirehouses, or something like this, now get to run around saying that they're a fiduciary, right? And they will. It's just not going to do anybody any good. And one of my pet peeves, and I was talking about this with somebody else a couple of weeks ago in an interview, you and I can call ourselves a financial planner, a financial advisor, a wealth management advisor. We kind of like pick the title, right? And sitting right next to us might be somebody from a wirehouse that has a completely different compensation structure and business model that's aligned to sell products or to trade in a client's account, and they have the exact same title we do. It'd be like you going to see a brain surgeon and the person actually being, a podiatrist, right? But all they have to say is they're a doctor and they're not required, I think the world would kind of laugh about that, but that's maybe the situation with where I think the advisors, and I'm going to use this term very broadly, across the industry are situated. They're at a firm where I used to be, a really well-respected large insurance company that also did wealth management, but we had product sales requirements. It didn't matter how good I was at financial planning if I didn't sell enough of their product. And I always told them we should just call a spade, right? Let's just put it out there, right? You guys are really good at this product. You should only hire people to sell the product. And then the argument was, well, we have to be this holistic planning thing. It's like, I can't fathom an idea of turning my being a father on and then turning my being a father off, right? It's a nonsensical thing, right?
It's a good analogy.
I can't love my wife and be fully committed to her in our relationship and then turn it off sometimes. I mean, the world would poke at that very quickly, and we have titles for people that maybe take those types of actions in our world. They're generally not esteemed very highly, and yet.
But this is a reality we have to embrace because it is the reality. And the registered investment advisors, or RIAs, of the world that are out there saying, well, we're great, we're special because we're a fiduciary, that's no better than saying you do comprehensive wealth management or that you deploy best of breed or that you're fiercely independent. It's just noise, and the consumer doesn't understand. And candidly, the consumer should care, but under the current structure, they don't care, and that is a challenge for our industry going forward, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I would say this as well. I'd like to address one more challenge on your last question.
No, go ahead.
And that's diversity. We are not a diverse industry, and other industries have done much better than we have. Again, I'll go back to some of the other service industries, the legal industry, the accounting industry. I'm not saying that they've solved the problem.
Sure. They're marginally further ahead of
But they're ahead, exactly. And the financial service industry is behind, and companies need to step up and address that problem, and their willingness to do that will be, in my opinion, one of the keys to their future success or their future demise. There is a strong business case for diversity, regardless of whether you think it's the right thing to strive for. If you are not diverse, once again, you're not going to have those diverse perspectives, those diverse ideas. You will not innovate, you will not evolve, and you will be selected for extinction. But it's beyond that. It's demographics as well. Look around the country and understand where the power is and where it's shifting in this country. And if you're not on top of that vis-a-vis clients and employees, once again, you are putting yourselves at a disadvantage. And another thing, if you're one of these firms that says, well, isn't it great? Well, we have a lot of women. Well, that's great because we are not a gender equal industry either.
For sure.
But it's not just looking at one area where you may have succeeded. We need full, comprehensive, there I am going to use the term, diversity.
Sure.
Or, once again, we will be at a disadvantage. And I believe, by the way, the wirehouses, some of the larger companies actually have done a better job on the diversity side. And we RIAs better catch up. And people say, well, it's hard to find talent. I get it. It is hard to find talent, and we need solutions that generate a larger pool of diverse talent. But there are ways to do it, and we, for example, have used mergers as a way to help us improve our own diversity, which still needs a lot of work. Yeah. We've brought in a third-party firm right now, and we are going through an extensive, comprehensive process, working with a third-party diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to help us be better. Yeah. That's a big challenge for our industry, one that people don't want. A few months ago, after George Floyd was murdered, people were talking about it. How many firms put out a statement and then did nothing? That's the question I'd ask.
Probably a lot of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it goes to, I think there's a couple of things that are driving it. One, compensation structures and this pathway to partnership that we talked about. Our industry still, from most of the firms that are really active in recruiting, most often advisors start in an eat what you kill kind of environment.
Yes.
I know I did, right? It was every day you have to run faster than the guy cold calling next to you to potentially, get some sales, build some clients. And it was a very destructive culture. There was nothing about it that bred team building. There was nothing about it that said, you might be really, really technically proficient at taxes or understanding how to communicate much better, but that person's really good at sales, right? And so the person who's good at sales survived. And the people who are really empathetic or were really good communicators or really good operationally, they're like, well, I'm literally starving. I've got student loans to pay. This commission-based world is not for everybody, right? And I think that a comp structure that, especially for the next gen, right, for young people coming out of college or starting in the industry, making a transition from another, we have to do a better job as RAs, not saying, yeah, half of your compensation is kind of commission-based, eat what you kill, because people are going to look at that and go, I have family and bills to pay or things that are important to me, and I have to put all of that at risk to get into this this field. And I think that's fair. I think another big one is, and I'd like to ask you about this one because you mentioned it, we kind of jumped over it. I see the large firms in the space forcing everybody into this homogenous, kind of sameness around what their identity is in the public, right? And when I look at social media and technology, it's essentially allowed people to form very, very disparate groups and communities online that like some of the, what I might consider random and wacky things, and they're mainstream of the people. I think our industry hasn't done a good job of empowering people to tell their unique story.
I agree.
And then also to build community around that. And that's something that I don't see a lot of firms, both big and small, talking about. How do you empower your team to build community around something that they're passionate about, that they're skilled about maybe their ethnic background or their gender or their experiences? You mentioned this a little bit when you talked about the multicultural aspect of making acquisitions. This just seems to me to be,
I agree. It is another problem that needs to be solved. And again, this also gets back to this concept of vulnerability and authenticity. I believe a big reason why companies are not talking about some of the things that I'm talking about right now is because what I'm really doing is exposing vulnerabilities to you. I'm telling you where I think our industry is vulnerable and where I think even our company can be vulnerable and where we need to be better. And that level of authenticity is we talk about it. The practice is what we really need to see. So I do think we need to do more in terms of community and in terms of embracing some of these differences and allowing people to explore the things that they want to explore. And we shouldn't be threatened by it. Yeah. We should see it as a strength. It's okay if people are different. And in fact, again, this is the theme I keep pounding on. That's a strength. Having people that are different and that express themselves differently, that are different, how can we not see that as a strength? What are we holding back? Why do we not want to push that out there? Some of the non-conventional things you're seeing us do at our company are exactly that.
Yeah, and I think that the part of the winning, what I believe is going to be the winning recipe here, is a pathway to partnership like what you guys have built, with the ecosystem or the environment that empowers that team member, whether, let's just say advisors right now, because they're kind of front line, to have a unique voice, right? And to maybe go after not even just unique markets, but to do it in a way that is unique. And because if you don't have the pathway to partnership, but you let them be unique, I think the fear there by then owners of the firms are, well, you know what, then people are going to see them as more valuable than XYZ firm, and I own XYZ firm, and so I want all the clients to see me and my firm as being valuable, not this over here, right? And so I think the pathway to partnership combined with allowing people to build diverse communities and, you know.
But can we agree it's the same thing on the client side? Can we agree that the age of one size fits all is just over? That mold is broken and has been broken for years. Again, people talk about personalized planning or customized, or I love when they use bespoke to sound more sophisticated. We use those terms too, by the way, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But here's what we mean by that. What we mean by that is we're willing to have some inefficiency. What we mean by that is that we are willing to do things in a way that maybe makes us a little bit less money, maybe pressures our margins, requires us to hire more people, forces us to limit the number of clients any particular advisor can be responsible for. You have to look at clients the same way. And you and I were talking about the Fidelity's advice value stack, which I love, and this concept of thinking about how we can provide differentiated value to clients. And that if you think about a 4-level pyramid, at the base of that pyramid, you have managing the money. And that's, of course, critical. That is a base. You have to be good at managing money. It's just not differentiated. We all love to talk about how differentiated it is. I like to think what we're doing with our concept of enhanced open architecture is differentiated. But if you really want to provide greater differentiation, it's not just managing the money, it's achieving goals. And many of us call that wealth management or financial planning. That's your estate planning, your tax planning, and all those things like that. And a lot of that, you can have differences from client to client, but in those 2 levels of the pyramid, there are differences, but they may not be dramatic differences. Go up to the next 2 levels, though. The next level up of providing true differentiated value is providing peace of mind to clients. And that's our mission, by the way. Our mission is to provide peace of mind to our clients and to empower their visions of tomorrow. How can you possibly provide peace of mind to a client if you're treating all clients the same? It means different things to all of us. And then the top level is achieving fulfillment. And that's the most differentiated of all. And the way we help a client achieve fulfillment is going to be different from client to client, because it all starts with what that particular client wants, not what you're telling them they should want.
Well, I think this is something, Joe Duran in our industry has talked about this for a long time, right? About figuring out what matters most to a client and then working from there. So let's shift gears just a little, and we've talked about probably more extensively than I was thinking we would, but fantastic conversation about the challenges our industry faces. Let's jump into forward-looking future mode, and I will circle back to the conversation about Nokia here and this one, because I actually have a quote from an article you wrote that I want to read and have you expand on. But
hope I remember it.
I'll read it to you. You'll be fine. Okay. We'll get you. Jump us out into the future, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? The purpose of the Future of Advice is really to, get leaders like yourself to share with us your vision for what do you believe our industry will look like, and is there a difference between what it should look like versus kind of the direction it's heading now, right? With the idea that how are we going to win, the future of advice for our clients first and foremost? What do we need to be building? What do we need to be thinking about? So jump us out into the future. What is Michael Nathanson's vision for the future of advice?
We need to go well beyond the services that are traditionally offered. Those are the base, but we need to continue to expand those services toward those top 2 levels of the advice value stack. And what I mean specifically is we need to be thinking about what's important to people beyond money. And that's one of the reasons we have this new brand, Managing Beyond Money, because for example, we've created our Curated by Colony platform.
Yeah,
you and I have
let's talk about that. Yeah, let's share more about that.
Yeah, so our Curated by Colony platform is this recognition achieved in part by actually asking our clients what was important to them, by surveying our clients.
Novel concept.
Novel concept, right. Not. This is that kind of bias I'm talking about. People are biased toward doing what they've always done because it's easy for them to do it. But what about actually thinking beyond that? And again, this concept of being open and curious and saying, maybe we could do things differently. And gee, maybe our clients want us to do things differently. You know what we found? You know what our clients' number one concern was, according to a survey that we conducted? It was actually cybersecurity. It wasn't
really
the S&P 500. It wasn't, that was the number one thing people talked about.
The security of their personal data and
exactly.
And
records. So why would we not build out an offering? Now, we may not do this ourselves. Here's another cliche, this concept of being everything to everybody. I don't believe we can be everything to everybody. That is a cliche, by the way. Don't really love it either, because again, tell your client that. Your client will say, well, I expect you to be everything to, to me anyway. But I do understand that. So what we've done is we've partnered with others at different levels, from a basic service to a much more sophisticated concierge-type service on the cybersecurity front. What about personal health? So what we've done is we've built out a platform that focuses on providing clients with services related to their health, and related to their physical state, their mental state, their emotional state, getting coaching, thinking about retirement and thinking about that next job, thinking about their children and their education, thinking about travel concierge. Now again, this past year, not so much travel going on. But you and I have talked about this. Travel is one of the greatest ways to learn. It's not just reading books. Traveling is an efficient and effective way to learn. It's also an effective way to experience joy in your lives. And we wanted to build out a travel concierge offering for our clients as well. So we've done that as well. Some of the basic stuff, concierge medicine services. We've come up with different concierge medicine services for different types of clients. So what we've been doing is building a platform of non-traditional life enrichment services. We don't charge for it.
But you don't charge for it?
We do not charge for it because, but see, this is what people talk about, fee compression. Yeah. There is fee compression in our industry. But our clients, it's very rare for a client to complain about our fees. It's just that we have to provide more and more services to justify our fees.
Yeah. So what you've always done in polishing the past, you can't just rest on those laurels. You're going to have to keep doing more and more.
Clients are going to make us do that, and we understand that.
It's not. You're going to be lowering your fee. Maybe that's the paradigm, right?
We're lowering our margins by providing more services.
You're lowering your margin, but maybe the paradigm is if you don't add more value, you're going to have to lower your fees.
You will.
Right.
Oh, if you're an asset manager, you got fee compression.
Yeah, so fee compression, if you are in the traditional asset manager kind of, I'm providing holistic financial planning the same way I've been doing it for 5, 10, 15, whatever the timeline is, you're going to have fee compression. We would agree on that.
Yeah, you got to do more and more for your clients. So just getting back to your original question, what you're going to see is advisors wake up to the fact that they have to do more. They cannot be limited. We as advisors are the trusted advisor often for our clients. And as the trusted advisor, as we like to say, another cliche, we are in a position to really help our clients hit those top two levels, that peace of mind and fulfillment. We have to understand that, and we have to be on top of that, because if we don't, someone else will. Amazon or Google or Apple, someone's going to come in and disrupt the industry. It's already happening. Yeah. And someone is going to do that if we don't. So I think we'll see a much broader service level. We will see more technology. Now, I want to be careful about technology. I know you're a technology guy, and I know you're doing phenomenal things. And I share your vision on the technology side, this kind of holistic approach to technology as well. And I'm a big fan of what you're doing. But I will say this. Technology is not evolution. Technology, you can continue to deploy more and greater technology. You must. If you don't do that, you will be left behind, and clients will once again demand it. So will advisors, by the way. But the problem with technology is it masks the underlying lack of evolution. And so we have to evolve the service model, but supported by much better and more comprehensive technology solutions.
We look at technology in a similar way, and we basically said, it isn't evolution. I agree with you. It's automation, right?
Yes.
What happens when we can build technology where clients, 80 to 90% of the client's management of their money and what an advisor does on a day-to-day basis can be automated more effectively, more efficiently, more time, with both time and money. Can we do that? Well, then what does the advisor do, right? And this is why I love what you guys are doing with Curated by Colony. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I wanted to spend some time here talking about it, right? When you talk about your love of travel, right? I mean, I think of a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn where he said, "Own only what you can carry with you. No languages, no countries, no people. Let your memory be your travel bag." And something I encountered years ago, and I can't remember where it came from, so I don't want to misquote it, but it's this simple exercise. And I do it with my family now. We do it with our clients when we can. And you take out a blank piece of paper and you make a line down the middle. And on the left-hand side, you write, like, what are all my assets? And then you just free think and write and start writing assets. And when I do this exercise with people, and when I did it the first time, I started listing things like my business, my 401k stuff. And usually about 30 seconds in, you see a light bulb go off for somebody, right? And then I'll say, I want you to write another sentence on the right-hand side. Now I want you to make a list of things that say, what are the most important things to me today?
Exactly.
And when you look at that list, right, maybe over here we've got businesses, an immense amount of money and wealth and complexity and financial stuff. But then when we ask a client truly, pulling the ego down and having a vulnerable moment and say, what is the most important thing to you today? I started getting answers like time, my creative mind, travel. And they were this idea of seeking fulfillment, right? So your podcast, Seeking the Extraordinary, I think touches on this. I think nobody wants to live an ordinary life, right? Like, who signs up for this? Like, I just want to be ordinary. I think that's maybe a conscious choice, but I believe that the right way to frame this for clients is to help them. I use the word live above the grind. You talk about being above the line. Same concept. How are you intentionally moving forward to a life of meaning and purpose? And so then how do we empower ourselves as advisors to do that? You have the resources to create Curated by Colony, and you're not even charging for it. You're just recognizing that your client's experiences and moving towards a more fulfilled life. Right?
But it does take resources.
It takes resources.
You have to do tremendous amounts of diligence.
Okay.
You need people. You need external.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't mean to undersimplify it. In fact, I think
it takes a lot of time and money to do something like that.
Yeah. And your client, I mean, this was driven by your clients. What's the interaction with your advisors and your clients as you guys have been rolling this out? Like, is it something, a few people are using and you're trying to grow it, or is it like, this is fantastic, we're going to open up to all of our clients? And
no, I wish I could say that, but I believe in radical candor, and I would say slow adoption so far. And I think that slow adoption is mainly on the part of our advisors' part, not in the part of our clients. I think our clients, I know that we've done a number of webinars. I was going to say countless, but I could count them. Yeah. We've done a number of webinars for our clients, and they're really well attended, and we do have clients that are jumping on these services. They see them as really exciting. Yeah. But our advisors, as great as they are, also need to understand what's really important to clients. And I think that that's becoming clearer and clearer to them. But I think I'd be dishonest if I told you that that at least all of our advisors are out there saying, hey, you ought to look into this concierge medicine service. I mean, during COVID, it's really great to know that you have a concierge doctor. It doesn't have to replace your existing doctor, but you have this concierge medicine service where you can just go and you press a button and you're talking to a doctor, and they are there for you. You don't need to make an appointment. They are there for you. And who doesn't want that right now? And yet, there are still people, including within our own company, that are still looking at things saying, my job is to help clients achieve their financial goals, which it is. It's just that's not your only job. Yeah. Your job is to help them achieve their financial goals and their life's goals as well.
Well, and I think this goes back to talking about the future, and maybe this is where I'm going to pick up on a quote where you wrote an article after attending a week-long business seminar or something like this, business class. And specifically, you were talking about how one of the presenters was giving some different case studies. And you said, to me, Nokia was no different from many of today's financial advisors whose great accomplishments may have lulled them into their own false sense of security or complacency. Many advisors have enjoyed wild success, and deservedly so, as they have done good work for their clients and helped them achieve their goals. Yet my experience is that many also have overly strong convictions about their business and how they operate. Their successes have convinced them they're doing everything right and that they'll be fine if they just keep doing what they've done to get them where they are. They're slow to innovate, and when they do, it's often just adopting other people. So when I think about technology, and the reason I wanted to put this quote right next to the curated by Colony work, when the work that we're doing right now as advisors to help our clients manage their money or achieve their financial goals will be automated. Whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, and whether it's Google or Amazon, or I think the case study was actually around a robo-advisor.
It was around Wealthfront.
It was around Wealthfront.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Whose mission right now, by the way, is to automate or autopilot. I'll have to go and look at something like this to put people's money on autopilot.
Yeah.
Right. When that base level of the pyramid of needs is being met by technology,
Yeah.
the advisor's responsibility and role is going to shift to one of focusing on higher levels of achievement.
Yeah. Yeah. As I reflect on that was a very revealing course that I took. It was a 1-week course, and it was attended by people like me, CEOs of wealth management companies. And when that case study was presented, I would say pretty much universally, not me, but universally, everyone dismissed the concept of a robo-advisor and said a robo-advisor can't hold your hand during a crisis, and we have nothing to worry about there for people who have a little bit of money. And right now, that probably in general is true. I don't want to overly be general about that, but it's true. Right now, robo-advisors are not, in my opinion, at a place where they can offer the kinds of services that our type of clients, for example, will demand. But robo-advisors will get better over time, and we need to continue to offer services over and above what a robo-advisor can do, including on the investment side. Because the robo-advisor concept is still somewhat basic. It will get better. It will improve over time. And again, I think it's just foolish for us to dismiss any kind of disruptive mechanism. But they've been around for a long time now, and they have not yet posed a threat to the wealth management industry. But it's not about thinking about where things are right now. It's about thinking about the future. So we need to make our investment offerings continuously better, more sophisticated. But again, we also need to bring the human advantage to the table and offer what we as humans can offer that it may be that technology can never replace. Now, people talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Okay, so here's what I think about artificial intelligence and machine learning. That reminds me of the Terminator. There is no such thing currently as AI.
Yeah.
We like to talk about it. It sounds
it's a buzzword.
sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's a buzzword, exactly. There is currently no artificial intelligence. Now, will the day come when there is artificial intelligence? That'll be interesting. Possibly. I have no idea whether that's technologically possible. At that point, when there's real artificial intelligence and there's truly a computer simulation of some sort that can have the same intuitive conversation that a human being can have, I'll really worry then. Yeah. For now, what I'm worried about is making sure that we continue to innovate our investment offering and that we get to know what our clients' values are and applying those values. So ESG investing is a good example, by the way, of that, or sustainable investing, whatever you want to call it. It's understanding what a particular client's values are and reflecting those values in how they invest, and then, of course, overlaying that with the full array of planning services and, as I said, life enrichment services. Yeah. That's the client experience the robo-advisor isn't even close to right now. Yeah. Will that be in the future? We better be careful.
Yeah. Well, I think that the robos have certainly, and we were talking about this at dinner, right? The number of people in the class you were in, they were all CEOs in the wealth management space. And they were quite defensive about their current position. And then you asked you asked the professor, or the presenter leading it, when you present this to financial company CEOs, what's their reaction? They're like, it's completely different. It's like, wow, this is amazing.
Wow, this is really neat.
I've asked advisors and people that run firms over the last couple of years as I've been getting into the technology space. space, like how many of you have ever opened an account on a Wealthfront or a Betterment or a Marcus, or like, go down the list. I'm not pushing any of them. And the vast majority of the time, right? I mean, 90+% of the time, they're like, why would I do that? It's like to see how easy and seamless they've made client onboarding.
Yeah.
Like, and how fast and how painless.
Yeah.
Right?
And we need to do that
and they've
too.
done it without a human. Right? So I think that, a buzzword that seems to be flying around the last couple of years is client experience. And I just don't see a lot of firms. I mean, yours is a great example with your Curated by Colony. I don't see a lot of firms going out there and asking their clients, like, how do you want to invest your money? Like, this is a really good one. Most firms have their investment committee who drives their investment policy, and then they kind of, all clients must adhere to that. I mean, this idea of, asking your client, how do you want to invest your money? Do you want to invest for impact or ESG or a sustainable objective, or just things you'd like to own?
Well, and to that point, it's the entire approach to clients. Now there's been a lot of talk actually for the last several years about segmentation. So we have to segment our clients and offer them maybe more or better services as they get larger. Rubbish. Yeah. It's
drives
absolute
me nuts.
Rubbish.
Yeah. So you're going to treat.
That's not what you do. First of all, you're going to judge that by, once again, assets under management. So you got a client that's got $1 million, but also has $100 million somewhere else, and you got another client that's got $1 million and in spend down mode. You're going to treat those clients the same way. I didn't even understand how you apply those standards, but that's not even the point. Yeah. It's not about client size. It's about the type of client. If you want to segment your clients, it's understanding there are commonalities among people. Agreed. But for example, the kind of segmentation I think about. So corporate executives. So we have a specialization in corporate executives. So if you're a corporate executive, you probably have concentrated positions, or you might have concentrated positions, perhaps in your employer's stock or other equity interests. You might be restricted or subject to a trading plan, for example. You might be overly exposed to the particular sector that your company is engaged in, if not because of your portfolio holdings, but just because of the very fact that all of your earnings are coming from that sector.
Yeah, all of your money is tied up in that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to segment, if you truly want to do things in a differentiated way and think about a way that a robo-advisor is not going to think, that's the kind of thinking we have to do. We have to say, well, wait a minute, you're a corporate executive. You've got options and you've got concentrated positions, and you're thinking about liquidity events and net unrealized appreciation in your retirement account. That's a very different set of considerations, for example, than a business owner, an entrepreneur. Yeah. Or say a professional athlete or an entertainer or a professional, a lawyer, for example, a partner at a law firm. It's different for all of them. This is the kind of intuitive thinking and work that we can do to get ahead of that technology. But we should never be complacent, though.
Yeah. I believe that you have a level of excitement and energy that's you bring to the industry and to your company that's just absolutely fantastic. Tell me what you're most excited about and why you still believe that advising clients on their money and helping them achieve, the higher levels of fulfillment. Tell me what makes you most excited about that, and both for you and maybe for the industry, why it's still a noble profession and desperately needed.
It is a noble profession, and one of the things that excites me about it is that it's really just only beginning now to be recognized as a profession. And I think we have a long way to go in terms of the kind of expertise that we are building up. So it does excite me. It is the right service model. So my remarks earlier, which I stand behind, about how the consumer doesn't necessarily appreciate that, well, that's up to us to make sure the consumer understands that. But we have the right service model, and others have a much more conflicted, not client first approach, and we have the right service model. Many of us remain fee only, and in that regard remain truly objective, or as objective as we can be toward our clients. Understanding that everyone will always have conflicts of interest, and it's up to us to understand, identify them, and mitigate them. We have the right service model. I think we've got the most opportunity. We are growing every year relative to other segments, and all the momentum is behind us, behind the independent space. And because all the challenges that I've identified, I think we're going to solve them. I think we're going to solve the continuity planning problem. It may be a bumpy road to get there as an industry. I think we're going to solve them. I think we will innovate. And I think we're in the best position to do that. While we may not have the money of some of the largest wirehouses, we are coming together to pool resources, but we have that entrepreneurial spirit that frankly someone at a large 15,000 person company isn't necessarily going to have. So I think we have the greatest opportunity behind us, and we have great partners as well. We have custodial partners. We have a lot of private equity coming into the business, recognizing us. I would say that the independent advisory space is just in the second or third inning, and we have a long way to go to be even better and to continue to win this battle of attrition.
Yeah.
With other service models. And I think ultimately, again, I do think about technology, I do think about robo-advisors. I don't think we're anything close to having true artificial intelligence. Not that I'm a scientist. And until that happens, there is no substitute for human intuition. So I love our industry. I love this space. I chose to be in this space. As we said at the beginning, I didn't need to. I see great opportunity in this space. I'm also just mindful of the challenges, and I believe in an approach where we have to be honest with ourselves. And as you can probably tell, my approach is to always challenge myself, challenge our company to be better.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, wrapping up, I've got a 3-part question for you, and then you can maybe have final thoughts. If you could give one piece of advice, or maybe a small amount of, handful of different pieces of advice to the younger version of you, and let's just say then that's the next gen young growth-oriented or hungry advisor that we need to pull into the industry, or maybe they're already here and they're saying, is this the right spot? What's the one piece of advice you'd give to the younger version of you or that next gen younger advisor?
To be a little bit more disruptive, to be much more willing to challenge the status quo. When I came out of my law firm experience, I had been used to being part of a larger organization. It was a large law firm, great law firm. But I had been in a place where it was not so much about challenging the status quo, and I think we need more people challenging the status quo, and not for the sake of challenging the status quo, by the way. Much of what I've said about being extraordinary and about the status quo, we need ordinary as well.
Sure.
We need to be good at managing money. We need to be good at understanding estate planning and anticipating tax changes and all those things. That's the ordinary stuff. And that's fundamental, as the great Jim Collins would say. We need to preserve the core, but stimulate progress from that core. So I would encourage people to be more comfortable challenging the status quo. And if you're at an organization where you can't challenge the status quo, you should think carefully about whether that's the right organization for you.
Yeah, I think that's awesome advice, and I appreciate you going back and hitting on the fact that you weren't belittling or talking down to the things that are fundamental, right? And that everybody has to be doing something.
That's the core.
We need it. Yeah. Okay. Second part of the 3-part question: what advice would you give to the leaders of firms or the owners and partners of firms that are, whether they're thinking about it or just starting the journey or well on the journey to building, winning teams and building firms that are going to serve the needs of their clients in the future? What's maybe advice that you'd give to the leadership or the partners of firms?
Yeah. Embrace interdependence. Don't be a hero. Understand that the more you give, the more you'll get. The more you serve, the more your purposes will be served. And to consider most carefully who your stakeholders are and your prioritization of those stakeholders. And just understand that if your primary stakeholder is you, and other owners of your company, you might be in for a rude awakening.
Awesome. All right, third part. Top 3 books. This is going to be tough for you because I know you're a collector and lover of books. Top 3 books that you believe every advisor, not our clients right now, but I'm sure there's crossover, but top 3 books that you believe every advisor in the industry, regardless of time in the industry, age, background, whether they're in a leadership position, that they should run out and put on their Kindle list or buy tonight.
I love that question. You and I are both bibliophiles. And I'll tell you, my list changes. I've published my top list, and it's hard for me because I love books from all different segments of the world. Yeah. So I like fiction.
That's why I saved this one for the last question. This is your hardest question I'm going to give you today.
It is because you're asking me to choose among children. When I answer a question like this is like a Sophie's Choice. Yeah. So here's what I think. I think the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Again, just getting back to this theme of super teams before superstars. The 5 dysfunctions of a team teaches us through a story. So it's an easy book to read. It's a fun book to read. It teaches us through a fictional story about how to have difficult conversations with each other and how to cut through some of the noise in terms of us being the unified teams that we need to be, that respect different opinions, in fact, encourage different opinions, and thereby can achieve greatness together. So I'd say that. I would say, you and I were talking last night, I know it's an oldie, but I love the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. And I just love that. I brought that to our company, and we read that. It's a long book. It's 350 or so pages, at least the version that I read. There's actually a new version. But I love that book because it, once again, teaches us these 7 habits are really divided among dependent, independent, and interdependent. And ultimately, the 7th habit of highly effective people is this concept of sharpening the saw. And what that means is that you can do all these important things, seek the win-win, and all these important things, have these great habits. But you ultimately have to also recognize that we're just human beings, and we have to take time for ourselves to reflect and to read about what others are doing, and to rest so we can sharpen the saw so that we're not a lumberjack out trying to cut a tree down with a dull saw. It's better to be more efficient and sharpen that saw. And then again, if you're asking me to speak to advisors that are in a leadership role, one book that's been moving up my list. It's not necessarily one of my favorite books. Is this a book called Great CEOs Are Lazy that I really like.
Great CEOs Are Lazy.
Great CEOs Are Lazy. And it's got a picture of a guy, going like this, and he's got his feet up on a desk. It's not about that, of course. And what it is, it's about telling leaders, not just CEOs, but leaders about how they can best perform their role. And what it teaches us is that we have to be lifelong learners. We have to be coach. We have to be an architect, we have to be an engineer, and we have to be a player. And being a player means that we are still spending time engaged in the fundamentals of our business. Ron, I'm going to cheat, though, just one little bit and add one more book.
Okay, number 4.
And this is not so much for a leader of an advisory practice, but I just want to put it out there as well because it's a book that changed my life when I read it, and that's How Google Works. And how Google works is not about the search engine. It's about how the company works and how Google has achieved what it's achieved. And one of the underlying themes is that we're all taught from the get-go to understand that gravity is pulling us down. And if we can release ourselves from the constraints of our past and dream about what could happen beyond these constraints, we could achieve things that are only unimaginable. And that theme pervades the book. It's a different way of thinking about everything. Here's an example for you. You go take a business school course, and they'll talk about span of control. So span of control, you look at an organizational chart and the people under you, that's your span of control. All your direct reports, you've got 4 people reporting to you, that's your span of control. That's an interesting concept. It's important. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be thinking about that. But what Google figured out is that span of control matters for a different reason than most people think. So most people think you shouldn't have more than 7 people under you, because if you have 7 people under you, you can manage those people. But if you have 10 people, 20 people, how can you possibly manage all those people? Google turns it on its head. They had an insight. They said everyone should have 7 people, more than 7 people reporting to them. Why? Because we don't want you over-managing the people that are working with you. We want them to have the freedom to think and not be controlled by you. It's just what Google says is that everyone at their company, they call them smart creatives. And you can't tell a smart creative how to think. You can't control a smart creative. What you can do is give them the right environment for them to flourish and do their best work and inspire them, flood them with inspiration. To me, that's an insight we all need to learn from.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you added the 4th one. I know I hate it when somebody asks me, what are my top 5 books too, so I thought I'd give you the hardest question last. Michael, I have enjoyed this interview. I hope to have you on The Future of Advice again soon. Thanks for inviting us down to beautiful sunny Naples for this. This has been fantastic. Again, to the financial advisors and clients and friends watching, I hope you've enjoyed another episode of The Future of Advice. If you'd like to learn more about the Colony Group, you can go to thecolonygroup.com. I would also highly suggest that if you are on LinkedIn, you look up Michael Nathanson with the Colony Group and follow him. His writing and blog posts on there are oftentimes some of my favorite quick reads. And again, Michael, thank you so much for being here, and really enjoy your leadership and your perspectives on the industry.
Thank you so much, Ron. It's been a lot of fun.